Hi there, this is Dr. Jeffrey Hull, and I'm the author of Flex, the Art and Science of Leadership in a Changing World. And today we're going to talk about Please Do Feed the Betas, the rise of the beta leader in today's changing leadership landscape. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in business that changes everything. You can find out more about us at FullMontyLeadership.com. So let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, here's something to consider. In an ever-diversifying workplace, should you still be aspiring to be an alpha leader? If not, what's next? Crybaby snowflake leaders? Maybe not. Stay tuned to find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our LinkedIn and Facebook groups by just looking for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. Remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get over there, rate, review, and subscribe to this show. We really appreciate it. Also, you can catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. You can also look for us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also catch us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, or leader in any capacity, you know that there is an ever-diversifying workplace. You got that, right? So is it appropriate for us to still aspire to be alpha leaders? If not, what's next? Well, to find out, we'll have to look at the next generation of leaders, who they are and what they want, because tomorrow's leaders are already a non-traditional mix of gender, age, nationality, culture, and geolocation. So what is next? On this episode, we're going to take a look at the potential fading away of alpha leaders and the rise of the beta leader. What is a beta leader, you ask? Well, let's find out together. Our guest on this episode is the man behind the revolution. Forget about the rise of the machines. Today he says it's time for the rise of the beta leader. Dr. Jeffrey Hull is a world-renowned expert on high-performance leadership with over 25 years of coaching, training leaders in a wide range of industries, from startups to Fortune 50 global companies. As the director at the Institute of Coaching at Harvard and a professor of leadership development at both Harvard Medical School and NYU, he has studied and worked with thousands of leaders in every level of assisting them to develop hyper agility needed to succeed in today's fast-paced, dynamic workplace. He is particularly passionate about supporting new generation of diverse beta leaders and to step up and lead. His writings have appeared in the Harvard Business Review, the New York Times, and other major publications. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the author of the best-selling Flex, The Art and Science of Leadership in a Changing World, Dr. Jeffrey Hull!
Wow.
Good to have you with us, mate.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's a lot of fun. We're going to get into a very interesting conversation. But where I like to always start my show is by asking, in this world of influencers and all those people telling us what we should be doing and who we're supposed to look up to, who is somebody who has really inspired you? Who is somebody that maybe we wouldn't even know, maybe we wouldn't suspect has been a great influence on your life, on your leadership, on your philosophy?
Do you mean a particular well-known individual? Because there are
No,
many of
it
those.
doesn't have to be well known. Could be somebody that we've never heard of. Could be your Aunt Sally. It could be somebody famous. It could be somebody infamous. You know, somebody who's had a lot of impact on your life. When you think about that, because invariably, you know, we've got all these famous people thrown at us every single day.
Right.
And oftentimes we don't realize that there are other people who influence us.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there, you know, the very first person who pops into my mind is the person that I profiled in the first chapter of my book, because this particular individual, who's a surgeon at Mass General Hospital in Boston, a Harvard-trained surgeon, kind of blew my mind as to what was really possible in terms of leadership agility. And it was good timing because I was already doing the research and beginning to write about the beta leader that you just talked about. But that's when I first met this particular individual, who would probably prefer to remain nameless because he's a well-known surgeon and he's not looking to become a famous prototype for Dr. Jeffrey Hull. But you know, he is the kind of person who is an alpha leader in the morning and a beta leader in the afternoon. And that was an extraordinary wake-up call for me to realize that the kind of agility that I was already researching and writing about was right there in front of me. So he's the very first person that I met.
What is it about him that so influenced you? What is it that's had such impact? I mean, of course, you don't have to give his name, but like, what, you know, there are a lot of people out there doing brain surgery, and not a lot of people, but, you know, enough people. What is it about him that specifically made such impact on you?
Well, it was exactly what he was able to do as a leader in a very, very short time. So, for example, 6 a.m. in the morning, I watched him do surgery because he wanted me to observe him in real time. So we are in the OR and he's cutting open someone who has a broken clavicle. It was pretty bloody, as you can imagine, but the leadership style was very directive. It would have to be. It's like the pilot of a plane or a surgeon. I mean, you want someone in charge. So he had 10 people around him, anesthesiologists, nurses, techs, all these other support people, and he was definitely giving orders. He was the boss. And I would have expected exactly that. But then I would have expected that same style to have lasted all day, right? Because that's typically what you expect, is whoever it is in the morning is who it is in the afternoon. Well, by 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was with a very different individual. He was being empathetic, he was counseling, he was listening, he was quiet. He ran meetings with a completely different energy than he had run the operating room. And it just really, he and I wound up talking about, how can you be so flexible? And he said to me, you know, Jeff, in today's world, I can't do what I do in the morning in the afternoon, or people are not going to want to work with me in the afternoon. They're just going to do what I want in the morning. And that's when I realized that this ability to be agile, to switch hats, to have a different focus during different situations was really possible. I mean, I had already begun to do that with some of my clients, but to see it in real time at that level extreme was really profound.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is quite amazing. So you were talking about beta leaders, and of course I mentioned them in the beginning about what they are. But before I go to them, I have to ask, because it was in your bio, which is you're a professor of leadership development at Harvard Medical School. Tell us about that, because that seems like coaching and Harvard Medical doesn't seem to match for the rest of us.
Well, it really is connected to the fact that all the doctors, physicians, are professors at major hospitals in the Boston area. So as an executive coach and as a instructor, I do a lot of teaching of leadership development to the physicians and to nurses, actually, who are all members of the faculty at Harvard Medical School. So this is in mostly hospital settings.
Yeah.
And if you think about the Boston hospital scene, there's probably 6 major hospitals, including the largest children's hospital in the world, which is Boston Children's Hospital, all of which are part of Harvard. So that's really where it all started, is my teaching leadership development to the doctors at Harvard hospitals, and then also coaching them.
But again, I think the reason I brought it up is because I don't think that we think about leadership in that context. You know, leadership is thought of in politics, it's thought of in corporate, but not necessarily in medical, because we think of medical doctors oftentimes as gods in white coats, who, you know, tell you what it is and you just go away and do it. So for me, when I read that originally in your bio, I was thinking, that's a pretty interesting place to be doing leadership with people who are so societally esteemed, not just doctors, but surgeons and all the rest of it. And then to say, hold on a minute, you got to have some leadership development. You know, I like the fact that it's a bit of a damper on the ego, you know? That's why I liked it.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes very challenging for them to have to step back and be a student again once they've already been in school for 15 years to become a surgeon. But when they get promoted to division, they call it a division chief or a vice president of a hospital administration, and they have 200 people reporting to them, or even more than that, then leadership becomes key to their success, just like anywhere else.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Now, in the context of that, so we've got these, you know, those are the alpha leaders. I like to call them not alpha dogs, but alpha wolves, right? So these are alpha wolves, right?
Right.
And you're talking about this rise of the beta leaders. As I said, if you're not aspiring to be an alpha leader, then what are we? Aspiring to be crybabies and snowflake leaders? What is next? Tell us why, you know, because it seems, again, a lovely contradiction. You know, you're working with these alphas, and then you say, no, we don't need to be alphas.
Well, actually, I don't ever say that we don't need to be alphas. I think I want to be clear that there's, as with my surgeon, as with the pilot of your plane, you better find the alpha when you need the alpha. So I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Not to always be an alpha, though.
Exactly. Well, not to believe that you need to be one to be effective in today's world. Because what I'll do is I'll walk down the street from the hospital where I just described the surgeon that I'm working with, and I'll go into a high-tech company where what is really crucial is innovation. And innovation doesn't just come from alphas. Innovation comes from creative, smart, growth-oriented, people that are always learning, and they can come in a lot of different varieties. And that's where I started to work with leaders who were not following that path, who were coming from a whole lot of different backgrounds, some of whom are actually introverted. They're more collaborative, they're more curious rather than doggedly bossy. And, you know, in those environments, the key is actually how are you going to get the best creativity out of the people? So that's where I started to actually research this evolution to demonstrate that there is like the rise of this different kind of leader. I mean, it sort of evolved probably from the geek lands, right? You know, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, is probably your prototype. I mean, he's in some ways not an alpha leader. He's kind of turned on that alpha style as he's become a public figure. But I don't think that his natural personality is particularly alpha. And I think you'll find there's a lot of creative people now that are realizing they don't have to follow that drive to be charismatic and to necessarily always want to take center stage or be autocratic. There's a lot more range possible in leadership. And the reason that this is so crucial, it'd be nice if it was just a diversity issue, like, oh, we can now broaden the portfolio. That's a positive by itself. Sure. But what's really crucial is that if you want innovative companies, then you need to hear from the creative people. And the creative people do not always follow that alpha lineage. And that's what I really wanted to focus on in my book.
Yeah, so I mean, this is saying that really to be a leader, you don't have to be the dogmatic and the command and control, which we both know is a very dying breed of effective leadership, at least.
Right.
So now there's a need to be something other than that, and this is what you're saying with the beta leaders. So let's talk to two things here. First of all, let's talk to the alpha leaders who are in play, because somebody says I'm an alpha leader. That's what I do. I boss people around. I tell people what to do. They're not going to, in a private conversation, they're not going to admit that publicly. But I take command. I do control the situation. I get stuff done.
Right.
And to them, you have a very direct message about flexing their beta muscles. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, those very same people run teams, and they are chartered with trying to get those teams to come up with creative ideas, to be innovative. But if those teams don't feel safe enough, if the people in the teams don't feel like they can speak up, don't feel like they can take a risk, don't feel like they can share sort of an off-the-wall idea because it's going to get cut off at the knees, they're not going to speak up. You're not going to get the best out of everyone. So, those very same alpha leaders, when they have to make a quick decision or they have to get a result out by the end of the week, it's great to be able to direct and delegate and have project management. But if that following week you want to have a creative brainstorming session, you better be able to swish hats and show up differently and set up a different context and go around the room and give people the time to talk. And you better be able to listen. So what I always do when I'm coaching those true alphas is I have them reflect on their listening skills, their empathy skills, their collaboration skills, their coaching skills. Are they good coaches? It's great to be able to direct people, but can you coach people? And often what they'll say to me is, oh yeah, I coach them to do exactly what I tell them to do. And I'm like, okay, but that's giving good advice, but is that coaching?
Right.
Well, tell me, let's talk about what coaching is. Well, coaching is not telling people what to do, giving advice. That's mentoring maybe, and it's valuable. But if you really want to coach, you have to ask questions. You have to listen. You have to be curious. And you have to take that extra time to put your phone down, not be texting, but actually looking at the individual and listening to them, or looking at your team. It's a very different energy. It's about creating psychological safety so that people that might not normally speak up will actually share some of the great ideas that can take your company to a whole new level of success. So it is a different, it's like switch hitting, I call it.
Yeah, but again, both of us with the psychology background, we both know, Jeff, that easier said than done, right? That that the alpha is like, yeah, okay, I gotta listen better, and then they don't. Yeah, I gotta coach, and then they don't. So how do you guide them? Because I want to talk to the alphas, as I said, I'll talk to them first here. How do you guide them to be able to do that when they've built 30, 40 plus years of being a particular way? And it's a way that the argument that because I know I've heard it too, the argument from them is, but this works. And my answer to that is, yes, this did, past tense, work. However, it's still ingrained within them. There's still, that is their quote unquote default position. How do you guide them, for our alphas who are listening, to move into that softer, more yin state?
In a word, it's practice. Starts with motivation. You have to have an interest and a willingness.
Yes.
Look for some role models, because there are probably people around you that have figured out how to do that. And be willing to take feedback. Ask for feedback from folks you trust. Get a coach. And it's small steps, taking a different tack. I recently had senior executive that I was coaching that was kind of in that exact same dynamic. The issue wasn't so much listening. He could be a pretty good listener when he wanted to be. The issue was really more toughness. Like, he really believed that his people should just get the work done, and they didn't need, kudos and all of that. And so I gave him some material to read about positive psychology and giving people positive feedback. And he was like, oh, come on, I don't know if I can do that. That they won't really appreciate that. And I said, well, yeah, let's give it a try. So just for one offsite meeting, he committed to doing one small thing, and often that's all it takes, is one small step. And he went around the room at the end of the meeting and he said, I just really want to take a minute to share some appreciation for each of you. And he stopped it. He had asked me how to do this, and we talked about give one piece of positive feedback to every single person in the room. And afterwards, people came up to me later and they were like, what did you do to this guy? That was amazing. Is he ever going to do that again? And he was just like, that wasn't so hard. I could do that. I said, well, why don't you try to do that at every single team meeting? And he kind of looked at me like, well, no, I don't know if I'm ready for that. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, it was a practice.
Yeah.
It worked.
It's fascinating. Years ago, we were working in Europe with a global team, and one of the CEOs was from South Africa, and he was a few years out from retiring and didn't want to be there, didn't want to be part of this training at all. And he was the most transformed. And I won't go into the details of it, but what I will tell you is that his wife called the global CEO who had brought me in, who I'd gotten to know, who had been a client of mine, and she said to him, what did you do to my husband? And he said, why? She said, he's not a grumpy old bugger anymore.
I love it.
And this same guy's personal assistant, quote unquote, secretary, said, contacted the global CEO had called in, and she said, something very strange is happening and I'm actually concerned. And he said, why? And she said, because his name was Andrew. She goes, and when Andrew came in to the office this morning, he brought me coffee. And the global CEO was like, is that a big deal? And she goes, he doesn't even speak to me in the morning. He grunts at me, which is the signal for me to bring him coffee. Yeah. And he brought me coffee and said, good morning. And it was from this same thing about understanding that it has to be a two-way street. And he said, well, and the global CEO said, well, tell me what the impact of that is. And so, she felt good, blah, blah, blah. He goes, how do you feel about working with him? She goes, well, I've worked with him for 25 years. I've never liked him, but I think there's something likable about him.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, that's such a great, I'm just so supportive of what you do. Now,
yes.
Let's flip the other side of it, because the other side of it is in that world of extroverted alpha type leaders,
right? The
introverted beta types are thinking, well, I'm just not made for that. I'm not that guy. I'm not that gal. I'm not going to step up and take control and lean in and do all those kinds of things. So
until they do.
Well, yeah, exactly. So let's guide them a little bit, please, Jeffrey.
Yeah, those are the folks I call the reluctant leaders, but they can be hugely impactful, and the world needs them more than ever. Mm-hmm. So, in most cases, what you're talking about is someone who could be highly successful and very accomplished at their job, very good software engineer or some other technical research capability, but they're not viewing themselves as you said, charismatic, extroverted, taking up space, being the one that does all the talking. But when they get offered an opportunity to make a difference, they realize that they are valued, and so they can do exactly the opposite of what we just described. They can actually practice speaking up and finding their voice and recognizing that they can have a huge impact on a team by naturally being empathetic, by naturally being curious, by being a good listener, by being collaborative, and they just have to speak up and do it more engaged, more in a more engaged, active fashion. So in some ways, getting a beta leader to speak up is easier, but that same level of reluctance may be present in those people too. Mm-hmm. What I typically do is I ask them to go back into their lives and think about when they've had a major challenge and they've had to step up their game. And often the energy of like a successful athletic competition or studying for an exam, and I'll ask them, what did you do to be successful? And they'll talk about being persistent, not giving up, being patient, going right to the end of the game, whatever it is, being competitive, and all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, so you're competitive. I thought you were not, you had no alpha traits. Oh, well, I can be very competitive. I'm just quiet. Oh, you're quietly competitive. Oh, but you like to win. Yes, I like to win. Oh, what does it take to win? Well, to win, you have to stick up and keep going and be perseverant. And, okay, so are you willing to do that with your team? Oh, I get where you're going here. Right?
Bastard, you trapped me. You smart person, you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a wonderful Korean woman who was super successful as a software engineer, and she was so good at her job that they wanted her to train all the people all over the world. This is with one of these big media companies. And so she had to start doing these training sessions online, virtual teams, where she had 25 people on the computer all doing Zoom calls. And she's kind of introverted, and she would wait. She would set it all up, and then she would wait to go around the room, and she would be one of the last ones to talk. And finally, her boss said, you're really good at this, but I think we need to get you a coach because people are a little frustrated that you're not being a little more committed, a little bit more alpha. And she said, okay, I'm open to getting some coaching. And at the end of the day, all she had to do was learn that they wanted to hear from her first. Not louder, not charismatic, nothing special, just speak first. And she was like, oh, I'm in charge. I said, yeah, why don't you try saying everything you say at the end at the beginning and see what happens? So she tried it, and it was like not even that difficult for her. She just didn't realize that it would make a big difference if she set the stage for the training rather than waiting in the back. Yeah. And so in many ways, it wasn't even that difficult for her. It was just a shift of mindset because she had thought of herself as sort of, with the Korean culture, it was also partly kind of to wait until respectful. She thought of it as being respectful. So it was just a shift of her perception, her skills.
That's also the thing, right? Because we're talking about cultural shifts as well. We have a geodiverse cultures now inside of organizations. People are in many different locations.
Exactly.
And if you come at them with an American approach and you're dealing with a Japanese or an Asian, Korean or whatever it might be, you're gonna bang into some walls if you come at that with the hard alpha mentality.
Right.
You're going to definitely, they're going to be pleasant with you, but you're not going to get much results. And at the same time, the other way, as you were just saying, if you're going to be quiet, respectful, and sit back, then, somebody who is North American or even British, is going to just run over them. And so it's a lot of the time, and this is one of the things you talked about in the book, which is this understanding of what I think what you called it was co-powering, which is the being able to flex from one to the other. Tell us a little bit more about co-powering.
Well, I think the key there is to realize that it's not about having just someone sitting at the top of the pyramid and everyone else at the bottom of the pyramid or under, right? It's this whole pyramid thing is sort of outdated in my mind.
Absolutely.
Today's world is networks. We are
Yes.
all connected. It is whether we want to be democratic or not, we're stuck with it because we all have access to the same information.
Yes.
And so regardless of what you see on the media, which is all about politics, which is a whole different game, the organizational game is about networked teams.
Yes.
And networks are interconnections that don't really have a natural hierarchy. So anytime you put someone on top, it's artificial to a certain extent. And yes, there's expert power, there's seniority power. There will always need to be a project manager. I think that's very valid. And sometimes that should be an alpha leader. But in today's hyper creative, innovative teams, you don't really just want to have the charismatic, extroverted alpha. You want to look for the right people and be able to switch gears. So that's why networked organizations practice co-powering, which is sharing the leadership over time, project by project, right?
Yes.
And that gives everybody a chance to step up and be a leader, and everyone a chance to learn what it means to have that leadership voice.
Yes.
And ultimately, then you're going to exponentially increase the impact of the organizational capability because it's not just at the very, very top.
Absolutely. So, okay. So one of the things you talk about in a book is fellowship versus, leadership in the traditional form.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that really goes to the crux of the matter of, as opposed to you must do as I say, which is the old school leadership. So fellowship, is that, I have 20,000 followers on Facebook, or is it someone else on Twitter?
That's a good analogy, actually. Yeah, we want to be really careful that it's not a popularity contest. How many likes can you get? Yeah, no, it's a much more sophisticated frame to be able to be a leader by being a follower. And I think that's a mindset that more and more leaders are looking to develop, which is recognizing that leading is not about power in charge, but about powering up the team. And sometimes you take a back seat, and that's actually a very smart move, because you may be missing out on brilliance if you take up too much space yourself. So to be able to do that calibration, like, am I getting the best out of everyone on my team? Sometimes I have to step back.
Yes.
And I have to push others forward.
Yes.
And so that means I need to be able to follow. And in being a good follower, you're actually being a good leader.
But in many ways, I mean, it's the title of your book. It's the flexibility, because I know that when I go in and work with a company, they'll say, well, I know you do a lot of work around servant leadership, and you speak for the Servant Leadership Institute and all those people, and is this about leading from the back? And I go, absolutely not.
Right.
They go, well, is it about leading from the front? No. Oh, well, is it leading from the middle? No. And they go, I don't understand. It's leading from wherever you need to lead from in the given moment.
Right.
It's learning how, like, this is not a place where I need to be in control. Step back, be quiet, and be in the middle of it, and just be in the middle of it. Let people do their thing. Sometimes you need to lead from the back by just letting people go ahead and not have you directing everything. And sometimes you need to lead from the front because it takes courage, and you've got to show that courageous position. Is that what we're talking about here with flex in that context?
Absolutely. You just nailed it. Yeah. I think that that's the revolution that we're in today, is the ability to lead from all different places. And, the servant leadership, which was from like the 80s, and contingency leadership or situational, all of those are still relevant, but what we're doing now is we're taking them into hyperspeed.
Yes.
Like, it used to be that you would do some following once in a while, but generally you were a boss. I want you to be able to do it all in one day.
Yeah.
Really be able to.
How many times can you move positions in a day?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And what's great about that is that there's two huge benefits to developing that skill. One is that as an individual, you develop a growth mindset and that's also that beta, never finished. You're constantly learning, constantly taking feedback from the people, from the space, from the energy, so that you're always improving. And so that's impacting you as a leader. And then the
Yes.
second benefit is that you look around the room and you're finally looking towards getting the best out of every single person. And you already mentioned it. Today we have virtual teams, we have cultural diversity, we have gender diversity, and you can't leave anyone on the sidelines, not if you really want to be effective. So in order to have both of those things happen, then this whole level of agility needs to be stepped up. And that's what I was really trying to focus on in this book, is supporting the alphas to be able to do the beta thing when they need to, and the betas to be able to do the alpha thing when they need to, and not disparage either one, but to
Right.
honor that we have both capabilities within us.
Yeah. And naturally, some people will have built their alpha muscles, and naturally, some people will have built their beta muscles. But if I'm a gym rat, and I've been to the gym and I've watched the guys in the gym who always wear sweatpants and thin little spaghetti stops, and they've got massive chests and big arms, and then you see them in the showers, and they look like a seagull because their little skinny little legs are hanging out because they've not worked the muscles. And it's a great analogy, right?
It is a great analogy.
So you've got to work it out, the whole thing. And talking about, because I use that as an analogy, but you're also big about understanding how the body is part of this model. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, there's a whole section of 1/3 of my book is on somatic leadership,
right?
Which is recognizing that physical energy impacts the space that you're working with, your team, in much bigger ways than you realize. And there's a lot of really good science about this now, that the timing, the energy, the lighting, the natural setting, the privacy, all of those things are relevant. And so it's both your space, your physical being, but it's also the broader space. So when I talk about physicality, it's not even just the person. That's the starting point.
Yes.
Your presence, your eye contact, your empathy, your gestures, that's all absolutely relevant. In fact, nonverbal impact is greater, the science has shown, than the verbal impact. But what we still don't pay enough attention to is the environment, the actual energy of the space that you create. And it can be really small things. We're not talking necessarily about taking your team rafting or whatever. I mean, it's great if you can do that, but that it's just a small tweaks, like sitting in a circle has a huge impact versus sitting at a boardroom table. Sitting under fluorescent lights versus sitting under natural lighting has a huge impact. Just small things. I think sometimes that the high-tech companies, these startups, have gone a little wacky with their, skateboards and ping pong tables, but they have a point. Of course. And I think it's a valid one, which is they started to pay attention to the energy of the space, and they want to give people a sense of creativity because they realize that being playful is part of being creative. Yeah. So, whether it's all-night hackathons or, playing ping pong at midnight, I mean, maybe we make jokes about that, but there's also good science that underpins it.
And this is the thing that, again, it's back to this, the seagulls of the gym. It's the same metaphor because right. I find that, I've been in companies where they've bought the ping pong tables, they bought the cappuccino machines, and they've got the bean bags, and nobody uses them, and it's a waste of time. Right. And I've been in places where, anybody sees to do is play, and no work's getting done, and that's frustrating. Right. And it's about all of the muscles working together. So it's agile leadership. It's putting people in positions that they're not used to and letting them run with it, letting them screw up. It's just like, I was working with a team once, and we were doing some work, and I said, I want you to put this person in charge of that. And they're like, this person would be horrible in that. And I go, yep. And they go, well, why would you want me to do that? I want them to do it for 2 days. Why? Because I want them to have compassion for the other person who does this, because they treat that other person with disrespect because they don't get it. So let's put them in the role so they can get it. Now, what happened was that person not only got respect, but they actually got, oh, I not only have respect for what it is you struggle with that I didn't realize before, but I've actually learned some new skills. And so we started doing this rotation thing. Then we did, and so it's like there's so many pieces. And I think we say, well, we got to become beta leaders. So, okay, so now all the alphas are going to back off and all the betas are going to step up. That's important. But, the fact that you're all sitting under fluorescent lights in cubicles, that are so
rigid,
rigid and fixed, and there's no communication. Well, what else? When was the last time anybody got together and played a game of Trivial Pursuit or something just to play together or do something? Oh, well, what else? It's like, because there's so many parts to this.
Right.
And one of the things we did with a company that was global is to say, we want a day, a week, where somebody does a lunch and learn about my culture. So, I'm from Pakistan and I'm a Muslim from Pakistan. And this is my culture. And they were always asked to describe normal and, in your culture, because normal is whatever you grow up with. And to describe, this is what we normally have for breakfast. And this is what time we would normally go to bed. And this is what it means. And it's like, it's mind blowing to have people break through those biases. And that's what I love about Flex, is that's really what you're asking us to do.
That is totally
it's not just about betas. It's about breaking through the biases that we all have about different things. And I think you're absolutely right that is the true future of leadership, is shifting out of that.
Right. No, I love that example. You were reminding me of one example where I was working with a startup here in New York City, and they were all millennials, two Harvard Business School grads, under 30. They had this incredible office, open, skateboards, everybody brought their dog. And then, so it was kind of like chaos in the office. Yeah. And when they hired their first HR director, she realized, and I give her a lot of credit because she's a beta leader, and their bosses were total alphas from Harvard Business School. They were like going to be super creative and have this wild and crazy game board kind of environment, which was fine. Sure. It's a high-tech e-commerce company. Yep. But she realized that there was too much noise, too much activity. They were all distracted. So she went out and she used some of the HR dollars to rent the space across the street called this B space. I think it was called B space. And it was like little meditation rooms with pillows and no telephone, you couldn't bring your phone. You had to leave your smartphone, and you could have like 30-minute quiet zones. And the CEO was like, I'm not paying for that. That's a waste of money. And she said to him, I want you to just do 1 month subscription and try it. And he said, I'll never go there. And then one day when he was having a coaching session with me, I said, why don't we go over to the B zone and see what it's like? Because I'm curious to see myself. So we went over there and we sat in the lobby because they would let us talk in the lobby. And then he went in and he spent 15 minutes in one of the quiet pillowed rooms. And he came out and he was like, oh, wow, man, that was so quiet. And I said, that's the point. And he said, exactly. Oh, I want to do this more often. And it was like, okay, it was all of a sudden he just realized that what he was doing was fine. It was actually really cool, but there was something else too. There was quiet. There was, so.
But it's part of, again, I know I was preaching to the choir, but it's part of this mentality that we have, which is in absolutes. And the absolute is, we've got to create a fun, engaged environment where everybody's doing stuff and is busy and quiet pods. Exactly. And something else, right? And, I'm always saying, where is the rigidity? Because sometimes the rigidity is in the lack of rigidity. Right. So like we said, well, we don't want to have any more, we want an open plan. And I'm like, that's a disaster. And they go, why? It's a great idea and it should be done, but it's not a good idea if I've got to hold a private meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So I want that space. So, well, should we just have, yeah, you've got to have all, not bits. You know, you've got to find a
My
way to,
favorite company has solved that by doing phone booths, which was
yeah,
they had an open space and they had like private British phone. What are those British phones?
yeah,
You
phone
know?
booth, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They had
Yeah.
phone booths
Phone
all
box,
through.
we call them in the UK, phone boxes.
But the problem
But
with that was that when we had our coaching sessions and we would use a phone booth, we were
real
like
tight.
knee to knee.
Yeah, it's a little too intimate.
But I give them credit; they at least tried.
We can do this, but you have to bring mints. My eyes are watering. What did you eat for lunch?
It's true. It's definitely intimate.
It's very intimate.
But
So,
they're on the right track.
sure. Now, you know, success is, you are massively masterful at this. Success is a journey. It's not a destination. And I think that oftentimes betas understand that. You know, there's always something new to learn. Alphas often will get in the other space of, you know, well, I should be there, and why aren't I there, and I need to be there.
Right.
And one of the things I'm constantly driving home to the people, the leaders I work with, is that that's not how it actually works. There is always there's always a next level, first of all, but also there's a level of the things you're doing now that you think are great and maybe even were great, but are no longer any good. What's one thing you did for a long time that actually may have blocked you from the level of success that you've been able to attain today?
I mean, I love that question because it prompts me to think about why it did become so important to me to focus on the somatic component of leadership, because I'm guilty basically of being part of that tribe that grew up thinking that, you know, getting my own private office was going to be the key to my success. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually I did get, you know, as a director of HR at Booz Allen in Hamilton, I had my own office with a nameplate and all of that. And I hung out in my office and I had a nice chair and a blah, blah, blah. And I had all the trappings until one day I couldn't barely walk because of lower back pain. And, you know, and I would do the gym thing and all the machines, and I'm as guilty as everyone of just getting into a rut of just going at night. And anyway, punchline, I realized that you can't sit at an office chair for 8 hours and not do massive, nasty things to your body. So ultimately started doing yoga, ultimately realized that there was a whole lot more involved in being present, whether it's mindfulness, yoga, or any of the other practices, somatic practices. And I just had to learn the hard way that, you know, you got to stand up, you got to walk around, you got to stay moving. And so that was one of my big lessons. And I'm glad I learned it personally, because it's one thing to be able to tell my clients, you know, you really need to get out of the office once in a while. But I can speak from experience that if you don't want to have a heart attack at 40 and be gone, you need to pay attention to those things. So
Yeah.
that's probably was my biggest wake up call.
So what was the turning point, not necessarily in that, but in anything? What was the turning point in you, in your leadership, in how you were leading? Because I find that there is a turning point for every successful leader I've ever met. There is a turning point. There's some point where they go, I just can't do this shit anymore. This is not good. I have to, you know, whether it's, and oftentimes it's, I am incredibly successful, but this is not working. What was the turning point for you? Or was there one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the turning point for me was basically failing at trying to fix my boss.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know if
Yes.
anybody, there's many of us that have tried, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to be given a boss that was one of the most abrasive, toxic, super successful partners at Booz Allen, and a super smart guy, but super nasty, and just would reduce people to tears. And, you know, I decided it was going to be my project You know, I was going to be the bigger man. I was going to take him on. I was going to give him feedback. I was going to fix him. Well, yeah, well, you know where that led to. That led to me leaving the door wide open behind me as I left because he was having none of it.
Right.
And that was a huge wake-up call. Like, I always thought I was good at coaching and I was good at counseling because I had grown up in the HR space.
Yep.
And it was a failure. And so it sent me back to school. Like, I need to learn how to do this because I did not do a very good job. And that's when I started learning about coaching and positive psychology, and that I should have taken a completely different approach with this guy. And maybe I would have failed anyway. I mean, there's no guarantee, right? That's up to him. It would have been up to him. I was making it all about me. So that was the first problem.
Yes.
Right? So it was a huge learning, and it was a huge failure. But it led to me becoming a coach and learning what works. And that's why I'm grateful for that experience. And if I ever run into him again, I will definitely thank him. And I'm sure he'll like laugh his, whatever. But
it is interesting, isn't it? I mean, particularly for those of us who've grown up in the counseling, therapy, psychology mindset. I can, because of the work I do at a level of root cause, I can usually find a way to find that all the way back to childhood,
right.
As you well know. And we tend to be the caretakers, and we tend to be the caregivers, and we tend to be and by virtue of that, the rescuers, or the matriarchal sense. We carry that yin energy.
Right.
And I think it's really one of the great lessons in life is, as somebody who is committed to serving in my life, I'm also now very committed to serving those who want to be served, as opposed to anybody who happens to cross my path.
Right.
That I can ride in with my white horse and rescue. Shoot the frickin' horse. Like, I'm done with that gig. It's too much.
Yeah,
so it's
I
a great
completely
lesson.
agree. It is a great lesson. And also the real humbling part of it was to realize that it was really more about me. Right?
Yes.
So, because that's the Achilles heel of those of us that do service for a living, is to believe that we're trying to help someone else, when actually what I wanted to do was fix him because I wanted to be right.
Yep.
And that had more to do with my ego than with needing to fix him. And that's a real humbling moment.
Oh, yeah.
And, I've had many of those, but that was probably one of the turning points.
Yeah, I call it spiritual ego.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
The language I use around it is spiritual ego, is I'm better than you because I'm da-da-da. And I can egoically talk about how evolved I am.
Right.
While being completely and totally in my ego and not even knowing I'm there. Of course, I think I was the mayor of that town for a while. By the way, I was self-voted. I was the alpha.
The alpha, you were the alpha and the omega, right?
That was it. Oh, absolutely. That was like 30 years ago. I was like, oh, this is a terrible gig to do. I'm done with this.
Yeah, well,
so
it was good that you woke up from that then.
Oh, yeah, well, when you land on your head from a dizzy height, that will do. When you fall off mountains, it tends to wake you up. So I think that real leadership, my opinion is that real leadership requires courage. What's the most difficult leadership decision you've had to make?
The most difficult leadership decision that I've had to make.
Courageous. It's like it took you a lot of courage, because again, the reason I'm saying this is because I think that oftentimes people think things are easy. They look at someone else and go, oh, it's easy for you. But very oftentimes it's not easy. I do things that people go, oh my God, that you make that look so easy. And I'm like, yeah, that was crawling over broken glass. Right? It wasn't easy. I might have made it look easy, but it sure as hell wasn't easy. It's easy looking back, but not easy in the present. What was something for you? Because I want to encourage people who are maybe particularly who are alphas, who are thinking, okay, I need to strengthen my beta skills, or who are betas who are going, I need to step up into the alpha role. And they're thinking it's an enormously courageous move to do that. That's why I want to use this as an example.
Yeah, actually, I appreciate the question because what you're making me realize is that the next book that I want to write, at the very heart of that, is what connects back to my desire to be an entrepreneur. Because I want to write, my next book is about research of why shouldn't we all be entrepreneurs? What's in the way of all of us trying to be creatively innovative, stepping up, taking charge, running our companies, whatever it looks like, right?
Yeah.
I teach at NYU and I always do an assessment of who's an entrepreneur and who isn't. And I'm always amazed that these business students, it's only like 14 or 15% of them actually show up as entrepreneurial. And I always wonder about that. Like, why aren't there more of us? They say they want to be entrepreneurial, but then when they take an actual test, like a real psychometric assessment, they don't come out very entrepreneurial. They're very risk averse, actually.
Right.
So anyway, to answer your question, I think the most courageous thing I ever did was when I lost my job because of my failure, I decided to start my own company with a friend. And I remember the first year when he said, "Oh, we got to buy our own toilet paper. And we have to, yeah, exactly. I'll always remember that because I had my own secretary and I'd always had like all those things taken care of as an office person. And all of a sudden we rented the space and we got, I was so excited and I get there and there's no toilet paper. There's no paper towels. There's no soap. There's none of that. And my partner and I were like, well, who's going to get that? And we were like, we don't even have a secretary. We're going to have to get it ourselves. So I remember telling my friends the luxury of being an entrepreneur was having to go to the store and buy my own toilet paper to put in my own bathroom. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it means to start your own company. You do everything yourself.
How do you know when you've made it when you're doing a bulk run to Costco for toilet paper?
Exactly, right. That was the start. Like, wow, this is really like nuts and bolts, right? Like staples. Yeah, that's when it gets real. That's right. And we stuck with it and it worked. And we're still very, he's gone off. We're doing different things now. And I've gone on to do stuff at Harvard and do my own thing. But we ran that company together for 6 years very successfully. And it took a lot of courage to stick with it because I had worked fantastic. In corporate America for many years. Yeah. So it was, I hadn't thought about it. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. So we're coming towards the end of the show and I want to move into the lightning round very quickly. You ready for some fun?
Oh yeah, especially if there's money involved.
Can't guarantee that part, but
no, just kidding.
We'll see how we go. In a parallel universe, what do you do?
Oh, probably would be a world-renowned cellist.
Cellist? Oh.
Yeah, or musician of some sort.
You're a fan of the cello?
I love the cello. I love the piano. I love drums. Yeah, probably some musical instrument. I don't know.
Do you play musical instrument?
I did. Yeah, played the piano.
Oh.
Yeah, I was a music major.
And you live in Manhattan, so you've got lots of access.
Yeah, lots of access to really look up to people and feel really small.
I went to the Lincoln Center. I'm trying to think what we saw. It was a Mozart piece, and it was just like it was so magnificent, just like breathtakingly beautiful, just the rooms are so beautifully designed to capture the sound. It's
the
quite,
whole experience.
It's quite visceral. It's amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. What's something that makes you cry, as in tears of sadness?
You're going to make me cry right now. I think anything that has to do with orphans.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you have a real sense of what that's about for you?
I do, because I'm adopted.
Ah.
And I found my birth parents. It's a whole story. But yeah, I spent some time in Asia visiting orphanages. Very powerful experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. One of my best friends, he's North American. His wife is North American, and they adopted from Japan.
Good for them.
And they went to, it's now cut off. Canada and US is now cut off from Japan from adoption because of new rules. But, you know, what was fascinating to me was to learn what it means for a woman to have a baby in Japan who's outside of wedlock. And, you know, they actually keep in touch with the mother, and they actually actively do that. But most of those women turn their back, not because they're heartless or cold, but because they're so culturally shunned.
Yeah, it's so painful. Yeah.
It's so, thank you for sharing that. I just appreciate it. What's something that will make you cry laughing?
Great comedian like Sugar Sammy from Montreal, my favorite comedian.
From Montreal?
Oh yeah, he's just hysterical. Oh my God. He does this multicultural comedy. He's an Indian guy from Canada, speaks French, English, makes fun of every culture, including his own, which is French, Indian, Quebecois. Oh, hysterical. I love good comedy.
Yeah, me too. I love good comedy. I particularly love good irreverent comedy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right? And in the age of politically correct, I fear that I might starve to death on that level because they're just fading away. And I'm like, come on, come back with the irreverence, please.
Exactly. Well, Sugar Sammy, go for it. He's
Sugar
incredibly irreverent.
That's fabulous. So this has been great, and I'm going to ask you to share with our audience where they can find out more about you and your book and all the wonderful resources you have. But before we do that, I just want to ask you to share with our audience something practical they can go do in the next 24 hours that will really have them implement a lot of what it is that you've shared with us, Jeffrey.
I mean, I would ask them to go to someone they trust, ask them what they consider to be their top strengths, and ask them what one thing could they do to take their leadership to a whole nother level.
Simple,
and it takes
practical.
Yeah, it takes courage though to ask for feedback, but do it. That's how we grow.
That's fabulous. Thank you, sir. So again, this has been wonderful. Thank you for all that you've shared. Please tell our audience where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources.
Two places, either at my website, which is jeffreyhull.com, myname.com, or at instituteofcoaching.org, which is the Harvard Institute where I'm part of the leadership team. And they can find me either place, and they can find the book on Amazon under Flex with Hull, Hull. But if they want to write to me, the best place to go is jeffreyhull.com.
Okay. We will make sure that that link is shared in the show notes. It's been an amazing time. Thank you, sir. We're honored and grateful to have you with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes by going onto Facebook or LinkedIn and looking for our groups there. It's under the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. And when you're ready to develop your leadership and loyalty in your organization, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com. To find out more about hiring me, Dov Barron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization, go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or /speaking. We provide you with the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Remember, you can go over to the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a www, just matrix like the movie, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and you get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $199, and you get it absolutely free for being a listener. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can be flexing your beta muscles. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your life, your leadership, and your business. And I am out.